Hey, hello everyone, and welcome to the Google Sheets Basics class with the Santa Clara City Library. My name is John. I'm a employee here at the library, and I'm going to be running this class for you today to tell you everything that you need to know to get started using Google Sheets. A few things to mention just before we get in. Firstly, I'm not a Google employee, but we're giving you this class and sharing information on how to use Google Sheets just because it's such a valuable resource for anything you'd want to do with a spreadsheet. This is also going to be a 35-minute program. We're going to have plenty of time for questions at the end. So at any point during this class, if you have a question, you can use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. So in your Zoom window, just click on Q&A and type your question there. And at the end, when we go through the questions, we'll go through them and answer all of your questions right there. If we do run out of time, though, like I mentioned, this class is about 35 minutes, so there's possible that we won't be able to get to every question. You can come into the Technology Center in the Central Park branch for the Santa Clara City Library, and there's always going to be a technology consultant there to help you out with any questions you have, whether it's Google Sheets or anything else. And this class is also going to be recorded and put on the YouTube channel for the library within a couple of days, so you can go back and look at anything you might have missed. With that out of the way, though, let's get started. We're going to jump right into the class. Um, First thing that we're going to do is, let me share my screen real quick. First thing we'll do is jump here into Google Drive. Now I know this is a class on Google Sheets, but Google Drive is sort of the thing that connects all of these different Google products, whether it's Google Docs, Google Sheets, or so on. So the first thing you want to do to use Google Sheets is first log into your Google account in Google Drive. And then if it's your first time, you'll see a screen that looks a lot like this. And you can create a Google Sheets spreadsheet from here. So to do that, just click on the New button in the top left. Gives you a couple different options, and we're going to choose the Google Sheets one. And then once you click on that, it will um, open you up into a brand new spreadsheet. So we're just going to close this on the right because we don't need any of its suggestions. And I'm going to quickly give you a tour of what we're looking at here. So in the very top, this is the title of your spreadsheet. You can think of it like a file name. I can click here, just call it class. And below that, you have your usual file edit menus where you can do undo, redo. You can print from here. We'll look at those later. And there are a lot of more just sheet specific options, which we'll get into a couple of these as well. Below that, you have your menu bar where you have more familiar options. You have undo, redo. You can print from here as well. There are a few data formatting. Yeah, there are a few data formatting options, as well as this one right here, the zoom level. I'm actually going to use that right now to increase the zoom a little bit, so that way it's a bit easier to see on Zoom. And beyond that, you have font size, bold, italics. You can change the way that cells look, and a couple of other different options, mostly to do with visuals that you can poke around with and see which ones you like. And then below that, we have the main spreadsheet area. This is where you're going to be doing most of your work in Google Sheets. It's organized into rows and columns, which as you can see are labeled. The rows use letters, starting with A, B, C, and so on. And then the columns are numbered, obviously starting from 1 and then going downward from there. And the way you enter data is really simple. You just click on the cell that you want, and then you type something. So you can type in number 1, click on a new cell. You can type in a 2. But as you're typing in a lot of data, as it starts to get tedious as you go from the keyboard to type something, move the mouse around, click on something else. So there are a few keyboard buttons that you can use just to speed up that process. You can press the Enter key to go down to a new cell and then type something else, enter again. You can use the arrow keys to just move in the direction you're pressing. And then you can use the Tab key to go one cell to the right. So that'll help you, you know, speed up your data entry a little bit so you don't have to keep moving the mouse around, clicking on new ones, and so on. And you can do more than just numbers. You can type words if you want, letters, anything like that. You can even do different sort of data types like dates. So you could do today's date, type it in right there. And then there are some nice date handling features that Sheets have, which I'll show you in a bit. But you'll quickly find that manually typing in all of your data like this can be pretty tedious. So there are a few ways to speed that up as well. For this one right here, you see I'm doing 1, 2, 3, 4. Obviously, I'm just doing a sequence where I'm counting numbers up. And instead of typing in all of that manually, what we can actually do is highlight enough of our sequence that we've typed out manually to give Google Sheets a hint on like what the pattern is. And you can see with this, it's really clear that we're just going up by one number each time. And then you can move your cursor to this blue dot in the corner and then click it and drag downward. And you'll see when I let go, it just continues that pattern for me. And we have a whole range of numbers. You can keep doing that for as much as you want. And it's just a good way to fill a whole range of values with a pattern so that way you don't have to manually type in every one yourself. Other options, like with dates, I mentioned there's some date-specific features. One of them is that Google Sheets can actually understand how months and years work for you, so you can drag out dates in a way that makes sense. If I were to do the same with this date, you see when we get to, September 29th, September 30th, then it rolls around to October 1st instead of giving you a date that doesn't exist. So with pretty much any sort of data, as long as there's a pattern, what you can do is highlight a section of that pattern and then use this blue dot in the corner to expand it and fill more cells with that same pattern. You can also do formatting. Like I mentioned, there's these options up here, so I'll show you a few of those. If you wanted to say bold it, you just click on the B for bold. You can also change the color of a cell. So this one, let's say I wanted it to have a background. We would go up to this paint bucket where it says fill color, click there, and you have a bunch of options. So if you wanted it to be like a light yellow color, click there. So we have yellow. And then another one is we have borders here. So you could click here and say, give it an outer border, which just outlines it in black. Might be a little hard to see, but if you look there, it has a bit of a white border, or a black border around it. Um, Now, this is all well and good. We have data here. We can look at it. And if this data meant something to you, it would be nice just to see it. But spreadsheets aren't just for looking at data, they're for working with data. And the main way that you're going to be doing that is with something called formulas and functions. So let's just create some test data here. I'll do a 2, I'll do a 3. And then now, if I wanted to say add these two numbers together and I wanted to just see what the sum of these are, I could go here if I wanted the sum to be here and start by typing an equal sign. And whenever you type an equal sign, you enter into creating a formula where you can have data from other cells be manipulated in some way, and then the result will be shown in this cell. So for this, what I could do is click on cell E1 here, and it'll just fill that in for me, which has the value of 2. And then if I wanted to add them together, I'd type a plus sign, click on the next one, and then I'll press enter. And you see we have a 5 right here. But I didn't need to manually type in the 5. It's just the sum of these two. And if I were to then change this 3 to, say, a 6, and enter that, we see this gets updated to be an 8. So it'll always be in sync with these two cells right here because the actual value is just whatever E1 is plus E2. And this is a simple example, but this is a really powerful thing that can help you make sense of complex and really big data. And it's the main focus of what you want to do with the spreadsheet. So a lot of experience with Google Sheets goes into how you can use these formulas for yourself to make sense of more complicated data. Um, but this is something that you can do with a lot of different spreadsheet software. Another feature of Google Sheets that makes it pretty unique is how easy it is to share and collaborate with others. So I'll do that right now just to give you an example. I'll go to this sharing menu, and right now you see it says private only to me, but I'll click here, and from this menu, I'll just create a link right now. You could type in specific people's email addresses and share it with them if you'd like, but I'll just do a link so it says anyone with the link can. I'll change this to editor, and then I'll copy the link. And right now what I'll do is I'll send it to my co-host Paul, and you'll see what it looks like when he joins the meeting or the spreadsheet. Okay, so just give him one moment to join, and then you'll be able to see what it looks like when somebody else is editing. It'll give you a nice little indicator of where they are and what they're doing, and you can work together with other people. Looks like he just joined. When you share it with a link, it doesn't give them a username. They don't need to log in or anything. It'll just give them some randomly generated animal usually. And then you see right here, this is where Paul is. He said, "Hi, John." Getting right back. And then we'll each, this is the same document. It's not like there's two separate copies, and we can each see each other's edits in real time, and we can work together that way. So really handy if you wanted to just share it with somebody, you could, if you wanted to just have them look at it, you can go here and change this to viewer, or if you wanted to work with somebody, you can share it with a link, make sure this is set to editor, and you'll have as many people as you want to share that link with collaborating with you to work on the document. But now that we've gotten some of the basics out of the way, it's time to work with a more real example. This is all nice, but it's meaningless data. We don't really care about this. So what I'll do is I'll create a second sheet, and this is where the terminology gets a little confusing. When you go into your Google Drive here and you create a new Google Sheets, this is creating a new workbook, and you can have multiple separate of these spreadsheets in a workbook. And you do that by going to the bottom. You have a couple of tabs here. Right now, we just have one called Sheet 1, but I will click on the plus and we create a second one called Sheet 2. I can rename it to something that's more meaningful. So this one, I'm going to give you an example of like an ice cream shop managing sales. So I'll just call it ice cream. And I have some example data that we can work with. So let me just put this in here and I'll walk you through what we're doing with this. So right here, I'm imagining that, let's say, I own an ice cream shop and I want to understand what are the popular flavors and when are people liking to buy these flavors? And just generally, how are my sales at my ice cream shop doing? So I have this spreadsheet here that has 4 columns. We have just the date of the sales. It's one day for every day in the month of August. And then we have the number of sales we make for 3 different flavors. We have vanilla, chocolate, and cookie dough. And here see, this one means that we sold 16 vanilla ice creams on August 1st. We go to some other one, like down here. This one means that we sold 20 chocolates on August 9th, and so on. So we have the whole month there. Um, and we can go through a lot of the stuff that I showed you with the first sheet example. We can maybe change the formatting to make this header look a little bit nicer. So we can make it bold. What we can do is change the alignment with this one here. Make it center, just have it like neatly centered on the column. And we can add some borders just to differentiate the title from the data in the cells. So I'll add an bottom border for this, just so that way you see uh, distinguishes the header rows from the rest of them. And then I can separate out the date from the rest of them by going down like this, highlighting all of the dates, and then going to the border section and adding a right border to that. And then looks a little bit nicer. Now that that's out of the way, though, what we can do is start working with this data. First thing that would be nice to see is just a graph of how things are changing over time and like how the two or how the three relate to each other. To do that is nice and easy. Just click and drag to highlight everything in your spreadsheet or everything in just the table you want. And that includes these column names at the very top. Once you do that, we go to Insert at the top of the screen here. Once we open up this drop down, it's a lot of different options, but we're going to insert a chart right here, which will create a graph. And then, as we see right here, immediately just created a chart that shows the vanilla, the chocolate, and the cookie dough sales for each day of the month. You can see they each go up and down. So these are like weekends. And we see at the very top is vanilla in blue. Below that is chocolate. And then at the bottom is cookie dough being the least popular. And that makes sense of the data that we have here as well. So you see vanilla is the most, chocolate's a little bit less, and cookie dough is the third for this particular day. And as we see here, all of the data matches. There are a few options to edit how this chart looks and exactly how the data is displayed. To do that, after you have a chart, just click anywhere on it once and go to the 3 dots and choose Edit Chart. That opens up this panel on the side. There are 2 different options. There's Setup, which is sort of just the overall structure of the chart and where it's pulling the data from. There are a lot of different options for, the different series, which is the data itself that's being represented, as well as the axes. You can switch to aggregating if you had, the data represented differently. Play around with those options if you want them. But the most common one that you'll be finding yourself changing is this chart type at the top. Google Sheets automatically selected a line chart, which is what we want in this case, but just to give you an option or an idea of the different options you have available, there's, bar charts, pie charts. If you were to click on bar chart, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for this one. You see it's kind of a mess, but if you had different data, maybe this one would look a little bit better. For this one, though, I'm just going to switch back to the line chart, and we can take a look at the second column, which is customize. So we have styles where you can change some colors. First thing what we'll do is change the axes and titles. As you see right now, it's called vanilla, chocolate, and cookie dough, which I guess that's technically correct, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And we can delete this here in the sidebar and call it just monthly sales. And then that'll be put at the top. And then other options that you can change, there's the legend, which changes how this one looks. There's the axes, grid lines. You can play around with these and see what you like. Plenty of options you have to change how the chart looks. For now, though, I'll keep it pretty basic. I'm liking how this is looking. So just close the chart editor and we can move on to doing some other stuff. Like I mentioned before, functions are a really powerful tool of spreadsheet software, including Google Sheets. So we can start working with some of those. To do that, we can add a new column here. So I'll call it daily total. And then we can change the styling so that it matches these ones. So that was bold, that was bottom border, and center aligned. And then from here, we can do a function. So what I want is the total amount of ice cream sales, regardless of what the flavor was for this given day. The way that we can do that is adding up all of the vanilla flavor, all of the chocolate flavor, and all of the cookie dough flavor into one. So to create a function, I'm just going to do the equals sign. And Google Sheets is really good about giving you suggestions about what you might want to do. In this case, what it's suggesting is exactly what I said, adding these three together. So instead of having to type it myself, I can just press the tab key to accept this suggestion. And as we see, 36, that is 16 plus 12 plus 8. If you do the math, that does equal 36. So we get our data for how many ice creams we sold that day in this column right here. And I mentioned earlier how you can use this blue dot in the corner to drag out like a pattern of numbers or of dates, but you can also do the exact same thing with functions. So I'll do that now. I have this function which calculates it for the first day, and I'll just drag this all the way down to calculate it for every day. And we see all of the calculations update correctly. And it's pretty neat what Google Sheets does. You see this first one references cell B2 to D2. So this means all of the ones in row number 2 here. But if you look at this one, you see we're on B3 to D3 because we went down a row. So it took all of these cell references. That's what it's called when you type in the row and column of a cell. It updates all of those references to still be relative to where the function is defined. So in this case, in the first row that I typed, it was the 3 to the left. In this case, the second row, it's still the 3 to the left, but now in the second row, we go all the way down here, we see it lines up with this one, and so on. And that just keeps it so all of these functions are calculating the sum based on the correct values for that day. So really handy that we don't have to do all of that ourselves. And it's nice. And now that we've done that, we can see a little bit more easily like the high sale days, like this one has 73, which is really easy to see from this column here after we do the math, but it's not so obvious if you're looking at this range here, exactly which day had the most sales. So it helps you get more information about what's actually going on by using these functions rather than just looking at the raw data. Other things we can do with functions is, let's say I want more idea on how popular these three flavors are overall, not just on a particular day. So we can do a similar thing that we did here, but at the very bottom and sum up each of the three columns. So add a new row here, call it monthly totals. And then I want to create a function. So I type the equals sign first. And Sheets suggests to me that I want to add up all of the ones in the vanilla column. Again, that's correct. It got my thoughts correct. So we're just going to press tab to accept the suggestion. And we have 745. Now I'm not going to do the math, but I trust Google Sheets to be correct that all of these added up together equals 745. And again, We select this function and go to the blue dot, drag it out to the rest of them, and it updates all of the totals. One other thing to note here is you see this daily total column. We didn't type in any numbers. These are all of the functions that we just created. But when we calculate the sum of all of the functions, we can do that as well. So you can kind of calculate some data and then calculate more data with more functions based on the result of the first one. And in this case, we actually get the total of all of the ice creams that we sold over the entire month just by doing this part first. So it's a handy little way that you can really get a lot of um, information about your raw data in a powerful way without having to do a whole bunch of tedious calculations by like adding all of these up manually yourself. One thing to notice though is now that we've done this, we added a new row at the bottom, and this isn't quite the same as the stuff up here. This is just the monthly total rather than for each day. But Google Sheets isn't that smart, so it doesn't know that we don't want that data included here. So you see the range in our chart got changed. So it goes all the way up to like 800 now, which is 745. So that's what it's trying to give us space to show. Obviously, though, we don't want that because we can barely see anything that actually happened during the month. So we can go back, click on this once to highlight it and go to the three dots to edit the chart. And now we can make some changes. So that way this is again showing us the data that we want to see. And what's interesting to us right now is this data range. So right now it's doing A1 to D33. And let's look at the spreadsheet and see exactly what D33 is. And we see it is this bottom row that we just added. And we don't want that included. So we'll go to this data range and change D33 just to be one row up, D32. And if we press enter, again, we have what we had before, which is, nice, easy to see. It's scaled correctly. And that's because we excluded this 33rd row that doesn't have data we want included in our chart. So, we've done a bunch of stuff. We've understood the daily totals. We've understood how popular each flavor is. But maybe let's say we don't like having just raw numbers here because 745, 609, these are big numbers. It's kind of hard to conceptualize whether that's good or bad. So we can do some more just to create maybe a percentage of how popular each flavor is relative to this total count that we got for the entire month. I'll create one more row for this. That way we have it, and I'll call it percent of total. And again, we're creating a function. So we type the equals sign. And to calculate the percent, all we have to do is take a total for a flavor, do a forward slash for division, and then we'll click on the monthly total across all flavors and we'll press enter. What we see here is it is the percentage, 41%, but you see it's not represented in a very nice way. We have, 0.4102. It looks ugly. Thankfully, Google Sheets has some nice, easy ways to deal with this. Up at the top, I mentioned there was some data formatting options. So you have currency, you have decimal places, but you also have percentages, which if you just click this, it changes that decimal number into a percent. So we can now easily see this is 41%. But it's technically 41.02%, and there's more decimals there that Google Sheets is hiding. You can change the formatting even more. Like let's say you don't want to be this specific about how many ice cream flavors you sell. So you can use the increase decimal places and decrease decimal places buttons to change that. If you were to press the one to the right, you see we get more decimals. We have 4 here, but let's say we want less. So you push the one to the left and you can change it so that way it only shows a whole number of 41%. So it just rounds to the nearest percent instead of giving you a bunch of decimals that you don't care about. And now, once again, now that we have this for the vanilla flavor, we want it for chocolate and cookie dough. And we can try to do the same thing where we go to the blue dot, we click and drag it out, but you'll notice this time we actually have an issue. And that's because if you look at the cells that we're referencing from this one, I mentioned earlier that these are relative imports, which get updated when you drag it around. So we have a cell immediately above the percentage of vanilla and a cell above and 1, 2, 3 to the right. So if we look at what's happening in the one for chocolate, we have one above and then one that's above and 1, 2, 3 to the right, which in this case is empty data, and that's not what we wanted. What we really want is for each of these to reference this same cell, no matter where they are on the spreadsheet, no matter where the function is defined, it should always reference this daily total. So what we can do is instead of using relative imports, we can change the way that this function is defined for vanilla a little bit to use what's called absolute imports, which means that the reference to this monthly total across all flavors is not going to be changed. To do that, what you do is you type a dollar sign before the row, and to make it absolute for the column as well, um, type another dollar sign. So instead of E33, we have $E $33. And then we press enter to confirm that. We see that vanilla is unchanged, but if we were to drag this out, we get what we want. We double click on this to see. Again, it is referencing, in this case, the chocolate divided by the same monthly total across all flavors that we want. And for this one as well, we see it's doing it correctly. So that's what the dollar sign can do. If there's one specific cell on your spreadsheet that you want to always reference, no matter where the function is defined, you can use these dollar signs before you drag, and that'll have everything update correctly without giving you maybe a division by zero or using data that you didn't want it to use. One more thing though that I can mention back to the formatting, I keep having to scroll up to see which column this is. Like, let's see, forget that that one's chocolate, this one's cookie dough when you're working here and you're like, oh, 34%, but what is this? Oh, is it chocolate? Okay. And this one's 25. What is it? Cookie dough? Okay. Um, Kind of a drag to have to go back and forth. It's an easy way to fix that though. If you look at the top left corner here, there's these two gray bars, and you could use these to pin rows to the very top. So I'll do this for our header row, just clicking and dragging on that gray bar, bringing it down by one. And now you'll notice that if I scroll around, we always have these header rows up at the top. So you'll never forget what each of these three columns represents. So we've done a lot. We've figured out how popular the ice cream shop is in general on each day. We've figured out how popular each of the flavors are, whether absolute numbers or percentages. But when you look at this central raw data section of our spreadsheet, it's still just a lot of numbers. It's hard to take in what all of this information is. So there's one more thing that we can do to make it a little bit more manageable. We highlight all of the different flavor counts. What we can do is do something called conditional formatting, which means changing the way that a cell looks based on the data that's in that cell. So what we can do is right click and go to view more cell actions. And this is where we find the conditional formatting. And it has a couple different ways you can do it. By default, it'll just do a single color based on some condition. So right now it is not empty, but we can change it to maybe greater than 15. And you see all of the cells that are greater than 15 get shaded green, and all the ones that are less are just white. But you can also use a gradient, which is a little bit easier to understand when we're working with data like this. That's just like how much of something did you have. Again, by default, it gives you this green color. You could click here and change it to maybe yellow or red to green, whatever you like. I'm going to stick with the green though. And you have some options on exactly the scale. So you can change this to a number. Maybe you wanted it to start at 15 again, just to make more of them pure white. Or you can leave it at min value and max value, and that usually does a good job of scaling the gradient in a way that makes sense. And then once you get everything how you like it, you'll press done and we'll close this. And you see it's now a lot more digestible what this data is showing you instead of having to look at each individual number and compare it with the ones around it to see, was this a good day? Was this a bad day? You can just see how green it is, and that'll give you a better visual indication of exactly what was going on that day. Okay, so I hope this was a good overview of the different features that Google Sheets has, and a walkthrough of if you have some data, how you can use Google Sheets to work with it and make it a little bit more manageable so you can understand exactly what's going on with the data instead of just seeing a bunch of numbers, both with the chart, with formulas down here, and with the conditional formatting. But I know there was a lot of stuff going on, and I'm sure you have questions. So once again, feel free to ask away in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, just the Zoom button there. Type in your question, and we can start answering them now.
All right, and that is my cue. Hi, everybody. I'm Paul. I'm here backing up John, and I'm going to read these questions out loud for the benefit of our YouTube viewers later on. So, John, starting, with question number one. Is it possible to have more than one Google Sheets workbook in the same shared folder?
Yeah. So shared folder, that's more of a drive feature, but we can take a look at that now. What you can see right here is I have just no folders in here right here. I just have the one Google Sheet, but I could create a folder, call it my shared folder. Then you can go here. What you could do is share this folder, whether copying the link or by sharing it with specific people. And then once you do that, all the people you share it with, I'll double click to go in here, will have access to this folder. And you can either right click and go to new sheet or go here and you can add as many things as you want to this folder. It doesn't even have to be Google Sheets. You could add some docs. You could just do some regular file uploads. And everyone you share this folder with is going to have access to everything that you put in it.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, next question. How do you keep your friend from changing your data? What if he makes a mistake? Can you find your way back or undo his work?
Yeah, there are a few options. The first one that's probably the most straightforward is if you don't want your friend changing any of the data, when you go to this sharing menu, so that way Paul could edit, I set this to editor. You could set this to viewer, in which case they could look at your spreadsheet, but they wouldn't have any ability to change it. Or if you wanted, you could use commenter so they could add little notes to different sections, but they wouldn't be able to change the raw data. And similarly, if you were to share it with a specific person, instead of using the link, I have my personal email here, so I'll just do this. And you see it autofills to being editor, but you can also change this to viewer, and in which case it would be the same. They'd be able to look at it, but they wouldn't be able to make any changes. If you do want them to be able to make some changes though, but not others, there's a history feature, which is this little clock with an arrow going around it here. Um, if you click on that, it gives you a history of the document. So we can actually work backwards and see what we were doing. So right here is the latest version. If I were to go further back, you'd see we have the raw data and some of the chart and some of the ones down here, but we don't have the formatting. So if you wanted to, let's say, undo that formatting I did, you could go to this entry in the history and restore this version, and that would undo all of the changes that had happened since. So depending on your situation, there's a few options you can use. Yeah, see right here. Paul just did something. Let's say I wanted to revert that, go to the history, and we see that an anonymous user just made some changes here. So we'll go to the version just before that, where we see that isn't there. Click here, restore this version, and it's going to confirm if you want to do that. Click restore, and we see that comment is gone now.
All right, awesome. Thank you, John. All right, this is the last question we have in here for now. So if people have more questions, please go ahead and type them in because we still have a little bit of time to answer them. So last question we have, is it possible to import an existing Microsoft Excel file into a shared Google Sheets folder?
Mhm. Yeah, you can totally do that. And there is great cross compatibility between Microsoft Excel files, which is another spreadsheet software platform, and Google Sheets. So the way that you would do that is go to the new up here, and maybe you want to be in your shared folder, click on new, file upload, and then you would just find your Excel file and upload it here and it'll look almost identical to how I have this sheet right here. You would just open it and there might be a confirmation, do you want to open this in Sheets? In which case you press yes, and it'll open just as if it was a regular Google Sheet. And that reminds me of one other thing that I can mention, because you can also do it the other way around. So this right here is just in your Google Drive. On its own, this isn't a file that you can just download, but you can convert it to other file types by going into the File menu up here and choosing Download. And you have a bunch of options here, but the two that are most common is Microsoft Excel. So this is if you wanted to do the opposite of that, where you have a Google Sheet and then you want to import it into Microsoft Excel. You would download it as an Excel file and then open that in Excel. The other one is PDF. This means you can't make any more edits to the copy that you download. So it's better just for viewing, or if you wanted to, let's say, print it out later, but not right now, you could do that there.
Awesome, thank you. All right, we had one more question come in. How do you move a spreadsheet into a Word document?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways that you could do that. Word supports tables, which aren't really full spreadsheets, like you can't do the functions and stuff, but you can format it to look a little bit like a spreadsheet. Uh, there's pretty good support for copying data like this. Like if I wanted just these rows, I could just Control C to copy and then open up a Word document and then paste that in there. And it should format it pretty well. And then you can use Word's formatting features to edit it from there. Um, you could also, if you wanted to, maybe take a screenshot just to like add a little bit of maybe you wanted like the highlighting and stuff, which wouldn't be compatible between Sheets and Word. You could take a picture of it and embed the picture into a Word document. The compatibility isn't as good between Sheets and Word as it is between Sheets and Excel, because Sheets and Excel are both spreadsheet software programs, but Word is more of just like a document editor. So it does different things, and you won't be able to perfectly import a Google Sheets file into Word, but there are some ways to import like little sections of it, whether you want to copy the cells themselves or just, take a screenshot of it and embed that image into Word.
Cool, excellent. I actually had a question since you mentioned printing.
Yeah.
I was curious if there are any printing tips you can share with us about maybe how to just print a section of your sheet if you want versus the whole thing.
Definitely. Yeah, Sheets has some good printing options. So what we can do, let me just show you what I was doing here. You can either go to File and Print down here, or there's just a handy little printer icon in your menu bar here. If you click on that, it opens up this printing menu. And there's, like Paul said, a few different options here. By default, I think it'll try and get the whole sheet onto one page. But as you can see, that makes things pretty small and hard to see. So a few options we have. One is to set custom page breaks, which means you just place lines exactly where you want the edges of the page to be. That's this option down here, set custom page breaks. I'll click here, and you see we have our lines here. I will click on this one and maybe drag it this way, so that way we have just our data here in one one page, and let's drag this down a little bit so that way we also get these last two rows. And now we have this rectangle, which is one page. And right now it would do this chart as the other page. So I'll press confirm breaks, and we see now we have two pages here. First one is all of our data, and the second one is the chart. Um, but let's say maybe you just wanted the data, you don't want the chart. A few options you have. One is to, after you set the page breaks, just press next, and that'll open up your printing dialog. And from here, what you can do is change the page range, go from all to custom. And since I only want the first page, not the second page, I'll just type a one. And we see we just have this one, and I could then print out just this and not have the extra chart there. Or what you can do if you know that there's only one section of your sheet that you want to print out, we'll come back here. You can first highlight everything you want to print. So I want to do just the data here, and I'm not including the chart or anything else. I go back to this printing menu by clicking the printer icon. And at the very top option, instead of saying print the whole current sheet, just print the selected cells. So I click here, and I don't need to fiddle with page breaks. Well, I guess I might change the scale a little bit. Um, but you see, we only have the data that we highlighted selected. And then again, scale, we have fit to width, but we can also change that to be fit to page, which means take everything and fit it onto one page. And there we have these two rows that were straggling on the second page now on one. And we can change the page orientation to portrait because this is more vertical. And we have a nice zoomed in full view of just the section that we selected. And again, we could just press next and print this out however we wanted. So a few different features for printing and changing how it'll come out on the page.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, that is all the questions that we had. So I think we can start wrapping up. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Yeah, so I hope you learned a lot about Google Sheets. I hope you feel a little bit more confident diving in and using it for any of your spreadsheet needs. A few things to mention, I said that there's always going to be somebody in the technology center. So if you have any questions after this class and maybe you, try something out and you get stuck on something, you can always come in and we can help you out with that. Um, If you wanted to get updated on some other classes we're doing, those will all be posted on the library website. So that is going to be sclibrary.org. When you first join it, it looks like this. If you want to be notified of future classes, you can, in this pop-up in the bottom right, type in your email address here and press the subscribe button. And that'll take you to a page where you can, change your preferences of what you want to be notified about, including technology classes, and then you'll get emails there. Or you can check on our calendar, because when we publish a new event, it'll be here, and you'll be able to see it on the library calendar. One last thing is that as you leave this class, there's going to be a short little survey to allow you to provide some feedback on how we did and what you might want to see in the future. Please fill that out because it's really helpful for us to understand what you like in the class and how we can do better in the future. So thank you, everyone. Hope you enjoyed.